For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
This is StratNewsGlobal. I'm Amitabh, Revi, and you're watching The Gist. A warm welcome to all our viewers who are joining us live, no matter where you are, what time it is for you. And a warm welcome to those viewers who will join this stream on our YouTube later. We're welcoming from Washington, D.C. again, Dr. Mukesh Aghi. He's the president and the CEO of the United States-India Strategic Partnership Forum. Dr. Aghi, good morning. Thank you for giving us time.
Good morning, Amitabh.
Dr. Aghi, just looking at the USTR Ambassador Tai's visit to India now, very important in terms of trade. We've seen meeting the External Affairs Minister as well, apart from the Commerce Minister. But just to put it in perspective in terms of US domestic politics, the Biden administration, they have so many priorities. I mean, domestic legislation has just been passed, very important for him. On the foreign policy front, whether it's China, Russia, Afghanistan, maybe not that much. How much of a priority, Dr. Aghi, is India-US trade momentum for the Biden administration?
Well, it's a tremendous priority. Let me just give you a bigger, different perspective.
Sure.
One area where Republicans and Democrats agree is China. And the fundamental question is, and they've put a three-pronged strategy dealing with China. One is definitely cooperation, where they can agree, and then basically containment, where they don't agree, and then some kind of collaboration in some of the areas, such as climate change itself. Now, keeping that in mind, it's important to understand India becomes very pivotal in US geopolitical strategy dealing with China. The Quad, which is Japan, Australia, US, and India. Now, while you look at from a defense perspective, you look from technology perspective, you look at from trade perspective, the economic partnership between India and US becomes critical in this Quad's arena. So they've already agreed to have secure supply chain. They've agreed on vaccine diplomacy. They've agreed on infrastructure, and then working on 5G, 6G, and newer technology. Now, when you come down to US, India, especially from Biden administration perspective, you have to understand that two priority Biden administration has. One is health, which is tied to COVID, and the second is economic. The whole stimulus package, Build Back Better America, all are tied to the economic agenda. And India becomes critical because as you look at the Chinese market, for US companies, at some stage, will start shrinking. At some stage, these companies are looking at China plus one strategy. India becomes critical from that perspective. So I think trade, economic collaboration, cooperation between India and the United States for Biden administration is very, very critical.
You're saying critical, but the potential which has been there. I just want to play out what Ambassador Tai said during a meeting yesterday. I think it was a welcome meeting yesterday, when she talked about how the potential had not been met and her priorities. This is Ambassador Tai speaking on the 22nd.
For growth between our two economies in areas like the digital economy, services, health-related trade, and yes, even agriculture. I believe that a revived TPF can help our trade relationship keep pace with other important aspects of the US-India partnership. But that bilateral trade never seems to quite live up to its significant potential. At USTR, we hear frequently, very frequently, from our stakeholders who are not shy on issues that will be familiar to those of you involved in moving goods and services between our two countries. Market access restrictions, high tariffs, unpredictable regulatory requirements, restrictive digital trade measures. These are issues where we intend to make progress, and they will be on the top of my list while I'm here. I'm also looking forward to discussing how further collaboration on what we are calling worker-centric policies can benefit our trade relationship.
Worker-centric, people-centric. The Biden administration has been talking a lot about that, even in foreign policy, which is usually seen as, you know, a different focus. But Dr. Aghi, just looking at the immediate momentum or lack of it in terms of India-U.S. trade relations, I remember Piyush Goyal maybe a year and a half ago during the Trump administration saying, you know, an early harvest deal is just a phone call away. But things have changed a lot since then. But the revival of this forum, how do you see it? Do you see it like not inventing the wheel all over again, but is it this new beginning that Piyush Goyal is talking about? Are there different set of criteria now because the administration has changed?
Well, I think you have to look at a couple of factors. One is yes, the economic potential between the two countries have not been fully realized. I remember hosting then Vice President Biden, and he said we need to take this trade to $500 billion in the next 10 years. And I think we are at 140, $145 billion. What we're seeing is merchandise good trade is up by 50%, touching almost $100 billion. You have to understand India has its own issues with the US, and US has its own issues with India. And by having a TPF platform restarted, I would say greased to move much more smoother, becomes a platform to discuss all open issues. And I think they've set up a target date of March of 2022 to get the TPF moving forward. And I think it's a good platform to discuss issues which pertain to both India's priority and the US priority. And I strongly believe that once you start leveraging the platform, you will see a momentum picking up on all the complex issues between the two countries.
So, in terms of what was talked about earlier, an early harvest deal on the way to a possible FTA, is that all pushed back on that timeline? Or is it
I,
not a
would s-
priority at all? I mean, are
I
they?
think the thinking within the Biden administration is that let's look at a much more structured approach. And you have to understand, Biden administration is different than Trump administration.
Yeah.
The earlier administration was very much focused on transaction, where this one focuses a lot on multilateral approach to all issues, dealing with China, dealing with the economic agenda, or working with India on the trade side. So I think the TPF platform is a multilateral approach on all those issues to be sorted out and taken forward.
Again, like we saw the External Affairs Minister tweet, and I think I have a comment from one of our viewers. He talked specifically about a specific emphasis on technological and economic cooperation being the basis of the India-U.S. partnership. And we can pull up Mr. Dr. Jaishankar's tweet again on that. If you want to elaborate on that, Dr. Aghi?
Yes, I think you have to look at, again, keeping the China's vision of 2025, where they want to dominate in technology forefront on a global basis. I think India and the US can collaborate substantially, either be on AI, be it on 5G, 6G, or having semiconductor plants in India. So there are a lot of areas both countries can collaborate and cooperate to make sure that there are choices world has rather than just having only China itself. So we are seeing that. I think if you look at what's happening on 5G, you have a couple of companies in India which already come with a stack of solution in that area. We're looking at AI, where I think China has taken the lead, and where more collaboration is happening between India and the US itself. So I think, and then when you look on the defense side, US has the lead on cybersecurity, how India can collaborate with US on the cybersecurity side. So I think it is a win-win value proposition for both countries to collaborate and strengthen each other.
We saw Ambassador Tai smiling when she was talking about agriculture, and there's a question from one of our viewers, Matara. What are the sticking points for the US vis-a-vis trade with India, Dr. Aghi?
Well, let me just first address the agriculture. You have to understand, while the agriculture in the U.S. is has been corporatized, and whereas in India, substantial workforce it works on the agriculture. And if you look at the whole economic objective of India growth story is how do you create more jobs? Yes, you want to have less dependence on agriculture, move to an industrial economy and definitely a services economy. So India also has to look at how do you protect those jobs while the transition takes place. And so while India talks about exporting mangoes and others, you have the Americans talking about exporting, strawberries and other areas. So there has to be more collaboration, especially on the I call the dairy products on the pork side. So there has to be a win-win for both sides to be able to increase the trade and at the same time protect the workforce on both sides.
Especially when you're talking about agriculture, Dr. Aghi, in terms of the GSP, am I correct to say that that's lapsed within the US and it would have to go back to Congress? I mean, where does that stand?
So once it was withdrawn and notified to the Congress, it has to go back to the Congress to approve it. But I don't think GSP is a substantial issue between two countries. If you look at all the categories of goods which are under GSP, they are the fastest export from India to the
Mhm.
US. It shows that GSP is not as critical as what we thought about it. So I think the leverage US may have over India on GSP is not any more pertinent. So I would say that we should not spend more time yes, politically it'll be good to have restoration GSP, but substantially the impact is not that much. But more important, you have to understand that uh, India has issues for example, mobility. Its workforce being able to move back and forth between the two economies itself. It has concern about totalization, where Indian H-1B workers are leaving billions of dollars in taxes, and there's no recourse to recover that. So I think, whereas the US is saying, hey, open up, give us more market access. So again, both have issues, and I think TPF platform provides that arena for both to sit down and talk and sort it out.
In terms of, say, I'm just taking another question from Omkar about data protection bill. I mean, once it comes into law in India, it might take a little longer, and data localization, those kind of problems.
Well, the value of data is when it flows. And once you balkanize the data, it loses its value. You have to understand there are more data which flows from US into India because of its IT services. And if you start saying we'll keep the data just in India for India, and then the US goes in the same direction, then it does have an impact on economic partnership. So I think, yes, it's important for country, both US and India, to have sensitive data localized, but at the same time, bulk of the data should be managed in a way that it creates more jobs, more trade, and economic partnership rather than balkanize the data completely.
And just out of curiosity, what is, since you're saying economics is such a priority for the Biden administration, of course, domestic economics, economic health is for any leadership. What is the position on international treaties or like, say, the CPTPP?
So I think one thing which came out from this meeting between Minister Goyal and Secretary Tai is that they will collaborate and cooperate on the world trade uh, uh,
Yeah.
arena itself, be it WTO and other areas. So you will see much more better coordination between the two countries on economic front, especially in the global bodies itself. You have to understand that the Quad, which is the alliances and economic agenda comes under those alliances, is a driving agent between the two countries. If you can't have a security partnership in some way or some form, the economic agenda gets challenged. So I think you will see a much more collaboration taking place between the two countries in economic arena. Now, you had raised the issue earlier on labor and everything. I think
Mhm.
that's a challenge. That's a challenge because you have the progressive left within the Democratic Party, which is insisting on labor rights, democratic rights, religious freedom. And I think that is a fine line Biden administration has to walk as it deals with India in much more broader issues between the two countries.
WTO, in terms of collaboration, what do you foresee? I mean, the Ministerial Conference is due very shortly.
We see collaboration on the IPR side. We
Mm.
see collaboration on for example, transfer of technology. We see collaboration on trying to protect the interests of Indian companies in the U.S. So you will see a much more broader area of collaboration taking place in the United States and India in WTO.
And on terms of intellectual property rights, TRIPS and the waiver, there the US has at least verbally seems to support India and South Africa's move for TRIPS waiver in terms of COVID related equipment, but the Europeans are holding out on that.
Yeah, it's a complex issue because you have to understand while the Biden administration supported India from the waiver side, but you had domestic companies who have the intellectual right challenge that because they spend billions of dollars trying to create this. So it is from a international trade perspective, international IPR perspective, you're dealing with a lot of landmines, and you just want to make sure that you walk them in a way it's a win-win value proposition for everybody.
Another potential landmine, Doctor, is it may not be directly related to trade, but it is related to the India-U.S. partnership overall and geopolitics in terms of China. Is CATSA? How do you see that functioning? Because there are seem to be indications that there could be a waiver.
Well, you have to understand, India is a sovereign nation. It has a right to decide what it buys to protect the country itself. CATSA is a domestic law of the US, which was built and written to punish Russia. And I think it was poorly designed. And the impact of that should not impact the relationship between India and the US. I think it would be wrong to create some kind of a sanction in India because it's buying S-400, which are facing more towards China than any other country. So it is, to me, a value proposition or a law which hurts US if you impose sanctions, especially with a friend like India, which is a Quad partner, which is an economic partner, which is a technology partner. So hopefully, wisdom will prevail, and India will not receive sanction as 400.
Just to wrap up, you've talked about it in many strands all through this discussion, Dr. But actio ergo sum asks, is it too unrealistic to think about the US and India forging the largest FTA in the history of mankind in the tune of $1 trillion? Why can't we do so?
I would say, we need to take some baby steps first to be able to get some kind of a momentum going on some of these outstanding issues. FTA is complex. It's trying to boil the ocean. Yes, we can dream about it. We can put a vision around it, but let's focus on small items. Let's take baby steps in a positive way before we start running. It is important to understand these are two countries which are aligned from a democratic principle perspective. They're aligned from a value proposition perspective. They're aligned from a language, from culture. We have 4.5 million Indian Americans and almost 1.2 million waiting for their green card. So we see the relationship moving in a positive direction. And I think if we can basically take out some of the obstacles on the trade side, and this is both on the US side and also from India side, you will see a much, much stronger alliances between these two countries. And we will realize the potential of these two countries, not just only from a trade perspective, from a geopolitical perspective, and people to people perspective also.
Dr. Mukesh Aghi, absolutely appreciate you sharing your time and your experience with us. It was a pleasure having you on Strat News Global again.
Thank you, Amitabh. Pleasure being here.
And just a reminder to our viewers, we are approaching that 100,000 subscriber mark on our YouTube channel. Do help spread the word if you already are a subscriber. And if you just joined our channel, you can go and look at both our website and our YouTube channel for a mosaic on the work we do. You've been watching The Gist on Strat News Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.